Appendices 2 and 3 of On War, Volumes 2 and 3, by Karl von Clausewitz, translated by J. Graham. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Appendices 2 and 3 on the organic division of armed forces and sketch of a plan for tactics. Reader's note: the heading is followed by an asterisk, which marks a footnote which reads, "To serve as an elucidation of Chapter 5 of Book 5. Reader's note ends. That the grounds which determine the division and strength of the different parts of the army, and which have their root in elementary tactics, are not very distinct, and allow of much that is arbitrary, we must suppose, if we look upon the various modes of formation which actually exist. But no great reflection is required to convince us that these grounds cannot determine the matter more exactly. What is usually adduced in relation to the subject, as, for instance, if a cavalry officer tries to prove that a cavalry regiment can never be too strong, because otherwise it is not in a condition to do anything, deserves no serious notice. This is the state of things as regards the small divisions with which elementary tactics is concerned, that is, companies, squadrons, battalions, and regiments, but it is much worse with still larger divisions, which are beyond elementary tactics, and where the question depends on higher tactics, or the theory of dispositions for a battle in conjunction with strategy. We shall now take up the subject of these greater divisions, brigades, divisions, corps, and armies. Let us first consider for a moment the reasonable grounds, the philosophy, of the thing. Why are the masses as a universal rule divided into parts? Plainly because one person can only exercise direct command over a limited number. The general cannot take 50,000 soldiers and place each man upon a particular spot and keep him there, and order him to do this and not to do that, which, if such a thing was conceivable, would plainly be the best thing that could be done, for none of the countless subordinate commanders ever intensifies, at least it would be an anomaly if he did, but each more or less diminishes the force of the original order, and takes from the first idea something of its original precision. Besides this, if there are a number of subordinate divisions, the order takes considerably more time to reach its destination. From this it follows that the divisions and subdivisions, by reason of which orders must pass through many hands in succession, constitute a necessary evil. Here ends our philosophy, and we enter upon tactics and strategy. A mass entirely isolated, which is opposed to the enemy as an independent whole, whether great or small, has three parts which are essential, and without which such a body can hardly be imagined. That is to say, one part which it throws out in advance, one which in case of unforeseen events it places in the rear, and the main body between these two parts. Reader's note: there follows a diagram which is simply the letters A, B, and C in a vertical column, A at the top, B in the middle, C at the bottom. Reader's note ends. Therefore, if the division of the greater whole is made with a view to independence, it must never have less than three parts, if the permanent division is to be in accordance with that constant requirement of independence which must naturally be an object. But it is easy to observe that even these three parts do not constitute quite a natural arrangement, for no one would willingly make his advanced and rear guards each of the same strength with the centre or main body. Therefore it would be more natural to conceive the centre as consisting of at least two parts, consequently to make a division of the whole into four parts in this order. Reader's note: there follows a diagram in which 4 points are highlighted with letters. The 4 points form a diamond. The diamond's broader axis runs across the page, its narrower axis up the page. The points labelled clockwise are A, C, D, and B. Reader's note ends. But even here it is plain we have not yet got to the most natural point, for notwithstanding the depth which it is usual now to give an order of battle, all distributions of forces, either tactical or strategic, invariably assume the linear form. Consequently there arises of itself the want of a right wing, of a left wing, and of a centre, and 5 may therefore now be looked upon as the natural number of divisions in this form. There follows a diagram in which 5 points are highlighted. The 5 points form a diamond, and again the longer axis of the diamond is across the page, the narrower axis up the page. The points of the diamond are labelled clockwise A, D, E and B. A point at the centre of the diamond, where the two axes cross, is labelled C. This formation now allows of one, or in the case of urgent necessity, of two parts of the principal mass being detached right or left. Whoever, like myself, is a friend of strong reserves, will perhaps find the party in rear (reserve) too weak in relation to the whole, and therefore will add on that account another part, in order to have 1/3 in reserve. Then the whole order will be organised as under. There follows a diagram in which 6 points are delineated. The 6 points are in 3 rows across the page. The topmost row contains only the letter A. The second row contains the letters B, C and D, and in the second row the letter C is directly underneath the A in the previous row. The third row contains the letters E and F. E and F are placed so that each is placed halfway between two of the letters in the previous row, E between B and C, and F between C and D. If the force we have to organise is very large, a considerable army, then strategy has to remark that such an army almost always finds it necessary to detach parts to the right and left, that therefore on this account, with such a force, 2 more parts must generally be added. We then get the following strategic figure. There follows a diagram in which 8 points are highlighted with letters. The points are divided into 3 rows. The topmost row contains only the letter A. The second row contains the letters B, C, D, E and F. B and F at the extreme right and extreme left edge are at some distance from C, D and E, which form a tighter group in the centre of the row, with D directly beneath A in the row before it. The third row contains the letters G and H. G and H are placed so that they are halfway between two of the letters on the previous row. G is between C and D, H is between D and E. The diagram appears therefore to be a pentagon, with the points A, E, H, G and C forming the points of the pentagon, with D at the pentagon's central point. To the right and left of the pentagon, in the central row and at some distance, are B on the pentagon's left and F on the pentagon's right. From this we deduce as a result that a whole mass of troops should never be divided into less than 3 or more than 8 parts, but still in this there appears very little that is definite, for what a number of different combinations may be made if we reflect that we might divide an army into 3 times 3 times 3. If we should base corps, divisions and brigades upon that number, which would give 27 brigades, or in any other possible product of the given factors. But there are still some important points remaining for consideration. We have not yet entered upon the strength of battalions and regiments, leaving that for elementary tactics. From what has just been said, it only follows that we should make the brigades consist of not less than 3 battalions. Upon this we certainly insist, and shall probably not encounter any opposition. But it is more difficult to limit the greatest strength which the brigade should have. As a rule, a brigade is considered to be such a body as can and must be guided by one man directly, that is to say, through the instrumentality of his voice. If we adhere to that, then it should not exceed a strength of 4,000 or 5,000 men, and consequently will consist of 6 or 8 battalions, according to the strength of the battalion. But here we must bring in another subject which forms a new element in the inquiry. This element is the combination of the different arms. That this combination should begin in a body of troops lower down the steps than a whole army is a point on which there is but one opinion throughout Europe, but some would only commence with it in corps, that is, in masses of 20,000 to 30,000 men. Others would have it in divisions, that is, masses from 8,000 to 12,000 men. We shall not enter into this controversy at present, but confine ourselves to this, which will hardly be disputed, that the independence of any body of troops is chiefly constituted by the combination of all three arms, and that therefore in all events, for divisions which are destined to find themselves frequently isolated in war, this combination is very desirable. Further, we have not only to take into consideration the combination of all three arms, but also that of two of them, namely artillery and infantry. This combination, according to the generally prevailing custom, takes place very much sooner, although artillerymen, excited by the example of cavalrymen, show no slight inclination to form again a little army of their own. They have, however, as yet obliged to content themselves to be divided amongst the brigades. Through this combination, therefore, of artillery with infantry, the idea of a brigade takes a somewhat different form, and the only question to be considered is what should be the minimum size of a body of infantry, to which, as a rule, a portion of artillery must always be attached in a permanent manner. This question is more readily answered than one would at first sight suppose, for the number of guns which, for every 1,000 men, we can take into the field, seldom depends on our will. It is settled by a variety of other, partly very remote causes. Then again, the number of guns which are united in a battery rests upon much more substantial tactical grounds than any similar organisation. Thus it is that we do not ask how many guns shall this mass of infantry, for instance a brigade, have, but what mass of infantry is to be joined by a battery of artillery. If we have, for example, 3 guns per 1,000 men with the army, and then deduct 1 for the reserve, there remains 2 to distribute amongst the rest of the troops, which allows a mass of 4,000 infantry for a battery of 8 guns. As this is the ordinary proportion, it is evident that with our calculation we come nearly to what has been found to answer best in practice. After this, we shall add no more in regard to the size of a brigade than that it should consist accordingly of from 3 to 5,000 men. Although the field of division is limited on one side in this way, and on the other it was already limited by the strength of the army as a given quantity, a great number of combinations still always remain possible, and we cannot let them be disposed of at once by a rigorous application of the principle of the least possible number of parts. We have still to take into consideration some points of a general nature, and we must also allow special considerations in particular cases to have their rights. First, we must observe that great bodies must be split into more parts than smaller ones, in order to be made sufficiently handy, as already noticed, and that small bodies with too many subdivisions or branches are not easy to handle. If an army is formed into 2 principal corps, each of which has its own special commander, there is an asterisk here which refers to a footnote. The footnote reads, "The commander is the true base of division. If a field marshal commands 100,000 men, of which 50,000 are under the orders of a general specifically designated, whilst the field marshal in person conducts the other 50,000 formed in 5 divisions, a case which often happens, the whole is not in reality divided in 2 parts, but into 6, only that one of them is 5 times as large as the others." Footnote ends, reader's note ends. That is as much as to neutralise the commander-in-chief. Everyone who has military experience will understand this without any further elucidation. It is not much better if the army is divided into 3 parts, for in such a case there can be no expeditious movements, no suitable dispositions for battle, without an incessant breaking up of these 3 principal corps, by which their commanders are very soon put out of temper. The greater the number of parts, the greater becomes the power of the commander-in-chief and the mobility of the whole mass. There is, therefore, a reason for going as far as possible in this direction. As there are more means of putting orders in a train of execution at a headquarters, like that of commander of an army, than with the limited staff of a corps or division, therefore, on general grounds, it is best to divide an army into not less than 8 parts. If other circumstances require it, this number of parts may be increased to 9 or 10. If there are more than 10 parts, a difficulty arises in transmitting orders with the necessary rapidity and exactitude, for we must not forget that it is not the mere question of the order, else an army might have as many divisions as there are heads in a company, but that with orders many directions and inquiries are connected, which it is easier to arrange for 6 or 8 divisions than for 12 or 15. Again, a division, if it is small as regards absolute strength in numbers, one which therefore may be supposed to form part of a corps, can always make shift with fewer parts than we have given as the normal number, quite easily with 4, in case of urgency with 3. 6 and 8 would be inconvenient, because its means are not sufficient to transmit orders rapidly enough to so many parts. This revision of our proper normal number gives as a result that an army should have at least 5 parts and not more than 10, that the division should not have above 5 and may be reduced to 4. Between the two now lies the corps, and both the question of its strength and the general question whether it should exist at all depend on the adjustment of the two other combinations. 200,000 men in 10 divisions, and the division split into 5 brigades, gives the brigade a strength of 4,000 men. In such a force we could, therefore, do very well with divisions only. We could certainly divide this force into 5 corps, and the corps into 4 divisions, and the division into 4 brigades. Then each brigade would be 2,500 men strong. To me, the first arrangement appears the best, for in the first place it has one less step in the gradation of ranks, therefore orders are transmitted quicker, etc. Secondly, 5 branches are too few for an army, it is not sufficiently pliable with that number. The same applies to a corps divided into 4 divisions, and 2,500 men form a weak brigade, of which there are in this scheme 80, instead of which the other organisation makes only 50, and is therefore simpler. These advantages are sacrificed for the sake of only having to give orders direct to 5 generals instead of 10. So far general considerations extend, but the points which require to be determined in particular cases are of infinite importance. 10 divisions may be easily commanded in a level country. In widely extended mountain positions the thing may be perfectly impossible. A great river which divides an army creates a necessity for the appointment of a separate commander on one side. General rules are powerless against the force of circumstances in all such particular cases. However, it is to be remarked that when such special circumstances make their appearance, those disadvantages which a multiplicity of divisions otherwise produces generally disappear at the same time. Certainly even here abuses may arise, as for instance if a bad organisation is made to gratify the unseasonable ambition of individuals, or out of want of firmness to resist personal considerations. But however far the requirements of particular cases may extend, still experience teaches us that the system of divisioning, as a rule, is dependent on general principles. End of On the Organic Division of Armed Forces. Sketch of a plan for tactics, or the theory of combat. Nota bene, according to this distribution, this first part is to be revised and completed. Reader's note, the following section is a table of headings. In this reading, a pause will indicate the presence of an M'. Reader's note ends. Roman numeral 1. Introduction. Definition of the distinction between the concepts of strategy and tactics. Roman numeral 2. General theory of the combat. Combat, cantonments, camps, marches. 1. Nature of the combat, active elements in the same, hatred and hostility, modification, other moral forces, judgment and talent. 2. More precise definition of a combat, independent combat, partial combat, how the latter arise. 3. Object of the combat, victory, degree, splendour and weight of victory. 4. Causes of victory, that is, of the enemy leaving the field. 5. Kinds of combat according to arms, close combat, fire combat. 6. Different acts of the combat, destructive act, decisive act. 7. Kinds of combat according as its motive is positive or negative, attack and defence. 8. Plan of the combat, strategic object of the combat, its aims, means, determination of the kind of combat, time, space, reciprocal action, conduct. Roman numeral III. Combats, definite subdivisions in the abstract, open bracket, formation, order of battle, elementary tactics, close bracket. A. The different arms. 1. Infantry. 2. Artillery. 3. Cavalry. Reader's note, the headings infantry, artillery and cavalry are all pointed out with a bracer, and the bracer has the following words written to its right: effects produced in action of each arm, the formation and elementary tactics of each in attack and defence based on those effects. Reader's note ends. B. The different arms combined in attack and defence. 1. Theory of the combination of arms. A. Infantry and artillery. B. Infantry and cavalry. C. Cavalry and artillery. D. All three united. 2. Fixed divisions which are formed out of them. A. Brigades. B. Divisions. C. Corps. D. Armies. Reader's note, these four headings, brigades, divisions, corps and armies, are highlighted with a right brace, and to the right of the brace are the following words: their order of battle, position, movement, combat. Reader's note ends. Roman numeral IV. Battles in connection with country and ground. A. On the influence of ground on the combat in general. 1. On the defensive. 2. On the attack. Nota bene, our reflections here must leave the proper logical chain on account of practical considerations. The ground must be taken into view as soon as possible, and this cannot be done without our at once imagining to ourselves the combat as taking place under one of the two forms, attack or defence. This is why the two subjects merge into one. B. General theory of the defence. C. Ditto attack. D. Defensive combats of definite bodies. 1. Of a small number of troops. 2. Of a brigade. 3. Of a division. 4. Of a corps. 5. Of an army. E. Offensive combats of definite bodies. 1. Of a small number of troops. 2. Of a brigade. 3. Of a division. 4. Of a corps. 5. Of an army. Roman numeral V. Combats with definite objects. A. Defence. 1. Measures of security. A. Guards. B. Patrols. C. Supports. D. Small posts. E. Chains of advanced posts. F. Intermediate posts. G. Advanced guards. H. Rear guards. I. Advanced corps. K. Covering the flanks on the march. L. Detachments to procure intelligence. M. Detachments of observation. N. Reconnaissances. Reader's note, in the original text there is no item J in the list. Reader's note ends. 2. Covering. A. Of single posts. B. Of convoys. C. Of foraging parties. 3. Lines of posts. Diversity of objects. A. In mountains. B. Along rivers. C. Near morasses. D. In woods. 4. Battles. Diversity of objects. Destruction of the enemy's armed force. Possession of country. Mere moral ascendancy. Credit of arms. A. Defensive battle without preparations. B. In a prepared position. C. In an entrenched position. 5. Retreats. A. The simple retreat, the retiring in presence of the enemy. A. Before a battle. B. In the course of the same. C. After a battle. B. Strategic retreat, that is, several consecutive simple retreats in their tactical dispositions. B. The attack. 1. Divided and treated according to the objects of the defence. 2. According to the particular objects of the attack. A. Surprise. B. Cutting through the enemy. Roman numeral VI. Of camps and cantonments. Roman numeral VII. Of marches. End of sketch of a plan for tactics or the theory of the combat. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia.